Under a sky woven from violet mist in forgotten prayers, the name Lamia drifts through time like a sigh. Hers is not a tale of clear beginnings nor merciful endings, but of desire that refused to die, of beauty that became both blessing and wound. The ancient poets whispered her name as if it were dangerous to speak too loudly, as though the mere sound could awaken the echo of her sorrow. They said she was once a queen, radiant and wise, her eyes bright as the shores of Libya beneath the sun. But before she was legend, she was a woman. And before she was a monster, she was loved. The story begins in a land that breathes heat and perfume. The sea there moves like molten glass, mirroring the slow pulse of the sun. Winds slide over dunes and temples, carrying the faint scent of honey and salt, of lilies crushed beneath bare feet. In this shimmering stillness, Lamia's name blooms like a secret. She walks through marble halls, her laughter trailing behind her like the notes of a harp. Her beauty is not of this earth. It seems borrowed from the gods, delicate yet alive with danger, as if her skin remembers the touch of divinity. It is said the gods noticed her, and one among them, great and shining, found himself ensnared by her grace. When he looked at her, the stars dimmed. When he touched her, the air itself trembled. For a time she believed herself blessed. The divine had chosen her, and in his gaze she saw eternity. Yet the gods are jealous of the love they share with mortals, and eternity is never gentle to those who reach for it. There are many tellings of what came next. Some say it was Hera's wrath, sharp and unyielding, that struck her down when Lamia bore the children of Zeus. Others whisper that the curse was born not from jealousy, but from balance, that mortal joy, too pure, too bright, demands to be shattered. Whatever the cause, the moment came when her reflection no longer belonged to her. Her body became a riddle of pain and beauty, her eyes too wide, her hunger too deep. She fled from the world she had once ruled, her voice echoing through caves and ruins, soft and trembling like a lament caught between dream and memory. In the silence of exile, Lamia learned the taste of loneliness. She watched the world move without her, the lovers, the dawns, the songs. Her skin, once kissed by light, grew cold under the shadow of her curse. And yet within her something still shimmered, the echo of her own beauty, the memory of love that once made the gods tremble. It was this contradiction, this fusion of tenderness and torment, that made her myth endure. For Lamia was never simply a monster. She was the embodiment of every desire too fierce for the mortal heart to contain. When travelers spoke of her, they did so with trembling voices. They said she moved through the night like silk, her presence both inviting and perilous. To some she appeared as a woman of unearthly allure, her eyes luminous, pools that reflected all one ever longed for. To others she was the serpent, coiled in sorrow, her beauty devoured by what it had become. But no matter the form, she was always a mirror, a reflection of longing itself. Those who met her saw not Lamia, but the secret they most feared or desired to touch. It is said that the moon follows her. Wherever she wanders, its light clings to her skin, tracing the soft curve of her shoulders, glinting in her hair like strands of silver. The night becomes her companion, and the stars seem to hum faintly when she breathes. She is not alive, yet not dead, not human, yet not entirely divine. She dwells in that space between being and memory, between lust and loss, a place where beauty burns too brightly to survive. To speak of Lamia is to speak of the boundaries between the sacred and the forbidden. Her story is a warning wrapped in silk, a hymn to the sweetness that destroys. Even the gods, in their unyielding perfection, feared the depth of her feeling. For love, when carried by mortal hands, is fragile. But when carried by one touched by divinity, it becomes fire. Lamia's heart burned so brightly it consumed her. Her longing reshaped her body. Her curse became her identity. And yet, beneath the ruin, her tenderness remained, aching like a melody that cannot find its end. When one listens closely, her name seems to move with the rhythm of the tide. Lamia. The syllables rise and fall like the breath of a sleeping lover. It is a sound that belongs to both the sea and the soul, to both temptation and remorse. She is the sigh before surrender, the pause before the fall. Those who seek her myth are drawn not by curiosity, but by recognition. For in her they sense the reflection of their own hunger, their own secret sorrow. The ancients feared her not because she killed, but because she reminded them that desire itself devours. Her story whispered that beauty is never free, that love without restraint becomes ruin. And yet they could not let her go. Artists painted her, poets dreamed her, and even priests spoke her name in hidden prayers, half in dread, half in longing. She became eternal not through mercy, but through memory, the kind of memory that wounds as it caresses. Imagine her now, alone upon a moonlit shore, the water folding gently at her feet. Her hands trace the surface of the sea as though searching for a reflection that no longer answers her. The night air trembles around her, heavy with salt and silence. Somewhere within her chest, the echo of her old heartbeat still stirs, faint but stubborn, refusing to die. She tilts her face toward the stars, the same stars that once watched her love, her fall, her transformation, and she whispers something only the wind can hear. Her voice is neither human nor divine. It carries the ache of centuries, the softness of a lover's sigh, the distant hum of oceans that have forgotten their shores. And as it moves through the dark, one can almost believe that the world itself leans closer to listen.
For Lamia's story is not about what was lost, but about what endures, the pulse of longing that outlives the body, the shimmer of beauty that refuses to fade even in ruin. The myth does not tell us whether she still wanders, nor whether she has forgiven the gods who cursed her. It leaves her suspended in that twilight realm of yearning and regret. Perhaps that is her truest punishment, to feel endlessly, to desire eternally, to exist forever in the tremor between love and hunger. And yet there is something holy in her persistence. Beneath her sorrow there lies a kind of grace, the courage to feel even when feeling brings destruction. In her, the ancients saw the proof that beauty cannot be contained, that passion cannot be tamed, that the human soul will always reach beyond what it is meant to hold. So, when the wind sighs through the ruins of old temples, when the sea glows faintly under the moon, perhaps it is Lamia passing by, a flicker of light, a ripple of warmth, the scent of lost desire brushing against the night. She is the eternal murmur of what once was too beautiful to last, the echo of every forbidden touch. To know her story is to feel the slow pull of something both tender and terrifying, the kind of beauty that lingers long after it has vanished. Thus the myth begins, not with a scream or a curse, but with a whisper, the whisper of a woman who once loved too deeply, and of a goddess who could not bear to see such love endure. It is the whisper of the sea against the shore, of the night breathing against the skin, the whisper that tells us that within every beauty lies its shadow, and within every shadow a trace of light. And so, as the tale unfolds, we do not follow a monster, but a memory, a pulse, a sigh, a secret older than time itself. Lamia waits in the darkness between stories, where love and sorrow meet, where every heartbeat hides a hunger. Her name is the beginning of the myth, and the promise that even in ruin desire still dreams. Beneath the same moon that had once borne witness to her exile, Lamia's figure emerges from the veil of night, luminous and trembling. She moves with the grace of one who remembers being worshipped, though every motion carries the ache of loss. Her skin, pale as pearl and soft as breath, seems to glow from within, a faint shimmer as if the soul beneath is still aflame. To look upon her is to see two beings woven into one, the woman and the curse, beauty and ruin bound together by a single heartbeat. When she stands still, she seems almost human. The delicate tilt of her neck, the fullness of her lips, the mournful gentleness in her eyes. But when she turns, when the moonlight touches her from the wrong angle, the illusion wavers. For beneath the skin, scales glimmer faintly like molten silver, shifting across her thighs and hips, vanishing again like the memory of pain. Her fingers linger too long upon what they touch, as if she fears the world might disappear if she lets go. The air trembles around her, responding to the quiet pull of her presence, the scent of crushed jasmine, the salt of tears never shed. She carries her curse as others might wear jewels, both adornment and burden. There are moments when she forgets herself, when she moves like the woman she once was, warm, unguarded, her laughter like the sound of flowing water. But then comes the reminder, a flicker in her reflection, a whisper beneath her skin, and her smile fades into the calm of resignation. Those who have met her speak of this moment, the instant when her beauty turns solemn, when something ancient glows behind her gaze. It is then that one senses the depth of her sorrow, the ocean of longing she carries in silence. In the days of her reign, when she still ruled as Queen of Libya, Lamia's eyes held the color of dawn, amber and gold, filled with warmth. But after the gods touched her life, their color changed, deepening into twilight hues, the kind that speak of storms and forbidden dreams. To look into them is to see both the woman she was and the creature she has become. She is the threshold between worlds, the edge where beauty begins to break. He came to her not as a conqueror, but as a whisper upon the wind. The god, Zeus, though she did not yet know his name, found her while she wandered along the water's edge, the hem of her gown trailing in the tide. He had watched her from the heavens, drawn not merely by her beauty, but by her stillness, the quiet way she seemed to listen to the world. Unlike the mortal queens who burned incense to him, Lamia did not beg for favor. She simply existed, radiant and unknowing, as if her soul belonged to the air itself. When he first appeared before her, the sea fell silent. His presence shimmered like heat. His voice carried the weight of both promise and danger. "Do you fear me?" he asked, though his tone was soft, almost tender. Lamia looked upon him, the gleam of his eyes, the halo of light that clung to his form, and for a moment she felt no fear, only recognition. "No," she said, "but I fear what you bring." And he smiled, for even gods crave the honesty of mortals. In that smile lay his virtue and his flaw, the hunger to be loved by one who might see past his divinity. He was power wrapped in longing, eternity seeking a taste of the fleeting. To him, Lamia was not a mortal queen, but a moment of purity, something untouched by the cruelty of Olympus. He did not come to destroy, but to possess, and in the fire of his desire, the world began to change. Their union was not born of conquest, but of quiet surrender. They met in hidden gardens where moonlight pooled like milk between marble columns. She would brush her fingers against his, unsure whether he was made of flesh or flame. He would trace the curve of her collarbone, whispering her name as if afraid it might vanish. Every touch between them carried the sweetness of danger, the knowledge that the divine could never truly belong to the mortal, and yet both reached for it all the same. When Lamia laughed, he forgot his throne. When he kissed her, he forgot his vows. For in her he found something no god should ever taste, the ache of mortality, the pulse of a love that could end. But the heavens are not merciful. From above, eyes watched with envy, and from that envy, ruin began to bloom. Hera, wife of the Thunderer, queen of the gods, felt the tremor in the air. The scent of another's name lingered upon her husband's breath, and though she had seen many betrayals, this one carried a different weight. The mortal woman who had captured Zeus's heart had not done so through ambition or deceit. She had done so by being true, by loving him as neither goddess nor queen could. And that truth was unbearable. So jealousy, that most divine of poisons, took form. It crept through the night and into Lamia's dreams. She saw visions of her children, radiant and laughing, swallowed by the earth. She awoke with the taste of iron upon her tongue, and the echo of Hera's laughter ringing in her ears. The goddess did not strike her down in public rage. No, her cruelty was subtler, more elegant. She left her beauty, but bound it to her suffering. Every glance that once inspired devotion would now bring terror. Every kiss that once promised joy would now taste of grief.
Zeus, in his shame, turned away. He whispered apologies that vanished before they reached her, then fled to his golden halls, leaving Lamia to bear the weight of their love alone. In her solitude, her divinity twisted, the warmth of her body cooled. Her heart, once filled with sunlight, began to echo with serpentine rhythms. Yet even as her form changed, even as her reflection grew monstrous, her soul clung to the remnants of tenderness. She could still recall the way he looked at her beneath the stars, the tremble in his voice when he spoke her name. The world would call her demon, temptress, devourer. But beneath those names, she remained what she had always been, a woman undone by feeling too deeply. Her curse was not her hunger, but her memory. Every scent of jasmine, every flicker of gold in the sky reminded her of what had been lost. And in that loss, something new was born, an intensity that drew others to her still, even as they trembled before her. Those who crossed her path would feel it first as a warmth upon the skin, a whisper at the nape of the neck, a sensation both alluring and dangerous. They would see the faint shimmer of her eyes before she appeared, and in that moment they would forget their fears. She spoke little, yet her silence carried volumes. When she looked upon a man, he felt both chosen and condemned. When she touched his hand, he felt the memory of every forbidden thing he had ever desired. In the shadows beyond her sorrow, the gods still watched. Fate, with her unblinking eyes, measured the thread of Lamia's existence with cruel precision. Hera's jealousy had shaped her body, but destiny would sculpt her legend. She was now bound to the eternal dance between love and hunger, her story a hymn to the peril of beauty. And yet, as she wanders the earth, half woman, half serpent,
There are moments when the air still softens around her, when the sea hushes as she passes. In those moments, the divine part of her flickers back to life. The world for an instant remembers the queen she once was, and perhaps, somewhere beyond the clouds, Zeus remembers too, the woman who taught a god what it meant to tremble. For even cursed, Lamia remains luminous. Her dual nature is not contradiction, but truth. She is the embodiment of every soul torn between tenderness and desire, between what it was and what it has become. And though her story is heavy with sorrow, there is beauty in it still, an aching, radiant beauty that no curse can extinguish.
Night falls like a bruise upon the horizon, and Lamia stands at the edge of her own reflection. The water before her is still, smooth as glass, yet within its depths flickers the image of what she once was. A woman of warmth, of laughter, of gentle hands that cradled the faces of her children and the God she loved. But the reflection ripples, distorts, scales shimmer where skin should be, eyes glint with inhuman light. The image dissolves, leaving only darkness. Lamia reaches for it, but her fingers meet only cold water. Every night she returns to that shore, and every night the same truth greets her. She is not what she remembers. Her torment is not merely her form, but the memory of how she became it. Love, once her crown, has turned to her shroud. She can still feel the trace of Zeus's hands upon her skin, the warmth of divine touch, the spark that awakens something in her too vast for mortality to contain. But where that warmth once lingered, there is only a hollow ache. His absence is a wound that refuses to close, and within that wound her desire festers, feeding on memory and sorrow alike. She dreams of him still. In her dreams, he comes to her not as a god, but as a man, stripped of thunder and crown. His voice is soft, his touch mortal. She reaches for him, and for a moment the curse falters. But then dawn intrudes, and the dream crumbles, leaving only the serpentine hiss beneath her breath and the bitter taste of unfulfilled longing. Each morning, Lamia wakes to the same hunger, not for flesh, but for belonging, for the warmth of a world that now recoils from her. Her curse has twisted that yearning into danger. Those who draw near her are devoured not out of malice, but out of the unbearable need to feel alive through another's heartbeat. Every act of closeness turns to destruction. Every whisper of love ends in silence. Thus she walks in perpetual tension, drawn to life, yet condemned to extinguish it. There are nights when she hides among mortals, cloaked in illusion. In flickering torchlight, she appears as she once was, golden hair cascading over bare shoulders, her eyes soft and deep, her voice low and melodic. The men who see her cannot look away. They approach, trembling with wonder, drawn as moths to a flame they cannot name. Lamia smiles, tender, wistful, dangerous. For a heartbeat, she believes she might remain gentle,
might hold him without breaking him. But the curse burns within her veins, and as desire blooms, it demands a price. The sweetness curdles, warmth turns to fire. Her lips taste salt and fear. And when dawn comes, she is alone again, surrounded by silence and the scent of loss. She weeps then, though her tears are few and precious. Each one shimmers like a pearl before vanishing into the sand. She curses Hera, curses Zeus, curses the gods who play with mortal hearts as though they were mere ornaments. But her rage is hollow, for beneath it lies the deeper truth. She does not only mourn what she lost, she mourns what she still feels. Her love for him has not died. It moves through her still, dark and potent, mingled with her shame. Love has become her tormentor, her most loyal ghost. And yet, there are moments when even the cursed find solace. Once, under a blood-red sky, as storms rolled over the sea, she thought she saw him again. A figure of light, standing upon the cliffs, his form blurred by rain and wind. Her heart, long silent, surged to life. She moved toward him through the surf, her voice breaking the air like a prayer. "Have you come to unmake what you have done?" she asked, her words trembling with both hope and defiance. But the figure did not answer. It dissolved into the storm, a trick of light, perhaps, or the god's cruel reminder that she is bound to absence. The sky thundered, mocking her. And yet, as lightning illuminated the horizon, she thought she heard his voice, faint and remorseful, carried by the wind. "You are still beautiful." That single phrase became her undoing, for beauty to her is both weapon and wound. It is the reason she was loved, the reason she was cursed, the reason she cannot be free. The world adores beauty, yet fears its power. And Lamia, who embodies both, stands trapped in the contradiction. In her, beauty has turned predatory. It consumes even as it seduces. She wishes to cast it off, to return to the simplicity of flesh and laughter, but her reflection denies her. The curse has made her eternal, and eternity is a prison with mirrors for walls. Her torment is mirrored in nature itself. When she moves through the forests, flowers bloom in her wake, only to wither moments later. Rivers pause as she passes, their surfaces trembling, unsure whether to reflect her or to hide her image. The sun, when it dares to touch her, dims slightly, as if in reverence or pity. Even the moon seems to keep its distance, shining upon her with a pale and mournful light. Yet amid this quiet ruin, desire still burns. It is no longer the bright, innocent longing for love. It is deeper, older, elemental. It calls to her from within, a pulse that refuses to fade. She feels it when she dreams, when the wind brushes against her skin, when she catches the scent of warmth on the air. It drives her to seek, though every seeking leads her closer to despair. Desire has become both her compass and her torment. Sometimes she wonders if Hera's punishment was meant not to destroy her body, but to preserve her longing forever, to make her feel endlessly what the gods themselves cannot. For divinity knows pleasure but not yearning. It knows power but not ache. Lamia carries what they fear most, the proof that even immortality can hunger for touch. In the solitude of her nights, she speaks to the stars as though they might remember her gentler days. "If I could bleed again," she whispers, "I would forgive it all. I would give this eternity for one heartbeat of warmth." Her voice breaks upon the waves, and the sea answers with a sigh, a mirror of her own endless craving. Her duality torments her. The woman within her longs to be held, to be seen without horror. The creature hungers, sharp and unrelenting, for the pulse of life she is denied. When these two selves meet, when tenderness and hunger intertwine, the world around her trembles. Her eyes flash between gold and crimson. Her breath becomes the rhythm of both seduction and destruction. Every fiber of her being rebels against itself, craving what she cannot have without killing it. One night, a wanderer finds her weeping beside a stream. He does not know who she is, only that her sorrow is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. He kneels beside her, and when she lifts her gaze, the air thickens with unspoken promise. "Why do you cry?" he asks softly. "Because I remember what I cannot be," she answers. He reaches to comfort her, his hand trembling, and for a heartbeat she almost lets him. Almost. But the curse stirs, ancient and insatiable, reminding her that desire is her doom. When their fingers meet, the warmth between them ignites into fire. His breath catches, his eyes widen, not in fear, but in awe. And then, as always, the moment collapses into silence. Lamia shudders, trembling not from triumph, but from despair. The forest around her holds its breath. The stars blink, dimmed by the weight of her sorrow. She kneels beside what remains, her heart heavy with the unbearable truth that love, for her, can only exist in the space between creation and ruin. And yet, as she turns away, a faintest smile touches her lips, not of joy, but of defiance. For even cursed, even consumed by hunger, she still feels, and that, perhaps, is her quiet rebellion against the gods who sought to strip her of her humanity. She will love even if it destroys her. She will desire even if it damns her. For Lamia's curse is not that she became a monster. It is that she remains still, achingly human beneath the scales.
The night hung heavy with heat and silence. A storm slept somewhere beyond the horizon, its thunder muted by distance, its promise trembling in the air. Lamia walked through the ruins of what had once been a temple, a place where mortals once brought flowers to gods who never answered. The stone was slick beneath her bare feet, worn smooth by centuries of forgotten prayers. Above her, the moon burned low and red like an open wound. She felt it then, the pulse of another presence, a heart beating not far from her own, fragile and human. Her senses sharpened. The scent of life, warm and intoxicating, brushed against her lips like a whisper. She should have turned away. She knew what would follow, knew that to draw closer was to court tragedy once more. But she was so very tired of silence, so very tired of the ache of untouched skin.
He stood at the threshold of the ruin, a man cloaked in shadow and rain. His face was half hidden, but his gaze, when it met hers, was unwavering. He did not flinch at her beauty, nor at the faint glimmer of scales that caught the moonlight along her neck. His eyes held neither fear nor worship, only recognition, as if he had dreamed of her long before this night. "Are you real?" he asked, his voice low, trembling with awe. "I was," Lamia answered softly, "once." He took a cautious step forward, and the world seemed to tighten around them, drawing everything, wind, moon, silence, into the space between their breaths. She could hear the rhythm of his pulse, steady and tender. The sound filled her like music, like a memory of what she had lost. Desire unfurled within her, slow and aching, winding through her like smoke. "You should not be here," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "I bring ruin to all who touch me." "Then ruin me," he murmured, and in his tone was no bravado, only yearning. Something broke inside her. The centuries of restraint, of hunger denied, dissolved in an instant. She stepped forward, her body trembling, her breath uneven. The distance between them vanished. His hand rose, hesitant at first, then steady as it found her cheek. His touch was warm, warm in a way she had forgotten warmth could be. Lamia closed her eyes, leaning into it, feeling the fragile weight of his humanity press against her curse.
For a heartbeat, she felt alive again. The world spun not around the gods, nor fate, but the soft space where two beings met in defiance of both. She drew him closer, her lips grazing his, tasting the salt of his skin, the fear that mingled with desire. His breath caught, and hers followed. Every motion was slow, reverent, inevitable. But beneath that sweetness, danger stirred. Her veins burned, her pulse quickened. The hunger she fought to contain surged upward, ancient and relentless. It whispered that love and death had always been one and the same for her, that no touch could exist without consequence. She trembled, caught between surrender and restraint. He felt her hesitation and only drew closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You trembling," he said, his voice breaking. "Are you afraid? I am both the hunter and the prey. I am afraid of wanting you." His lips brushed hers again, gentle as prayer. "Then want me." The words undid her. She pressed her mouth to his, and the world fractured. The taste of him, mortal, fleeting, alive, ignited something vast and terrible within her. The air thickened, charged with the scent of rain and skin. Her body arched into his, and for that single eternal moment, pleasure and pain became indistinguishable. Her curse, her beauty, her sorrow, all of it converged in the space where they touched. Light rippled across her form. The illusion that veiled her began to fade. The scales gleamed brighter now, tracing her hips and spine like silver armor. Her eyes, once gold, deepened to crimson. Yet he did not recoil. His breath shuddered, but his hands stayed upon her, tracing the shifting edge of her transformation as though it were sacred. "You see now what I am," she whispered. "I see you," he said simply, all of you." The words pierced deeper than any curse. Lamia felt tears sting her eyes, though they did not fall. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that even this fusion of beauty and monstrosity, could still be worthy of tenderness. She kissed him again, desperate, aching, as if the act itself might anchor her to the world of the living. But the hunger would not be denied. It surged through her like fire, consuming thought and mercy alike. The line between ecstasy and destruction vanished. Her hands tightened against his back. Her breath came ragged. He gasped, but not from fear, from surrender. And when the moment broke, it did so with both a cry and a sigh, a mingling of pleasure and ending. He sank against her, his warmth fading, his gaze still fixed on her face. "You're beautiful," he whispered, even as the light dimmed in his eyes. And for a heartbeat, Lamia thought she saw the faintest trace of a smile upon his lips, as though death itself had become gentle in her arms.
When it was over, she held him close, cradling him as she once did her children. Her tears fell at last, each one gleaming like liquid moonlight upon his skin. The storm broke then, rain spilling through the ruined temple, washing over them both. The water carried away the scent of life, the traces of touch, leaving only silence. Lamia's body shook with something that was not quite grief and not quite release. She looked down at her reflection in the pooling rainwater and saw herself fully for the first time. The serpent and the woman were no longer separate. They moved together, breath and scale, sorrow and grace. In this terrible union, she understood the truth of her existence. She was not cursed for her love, but for the depth of it. The gods had punished her not for sin, but for feeling too much. Lightning split the sky, and in its brief illumination, her form glowed like a vision, half divine, half monstrous, wholly sublime. She rose, carrying the man's still body to the edge of the sea. The tide embraced him gently, drawing him into its depths. She watched until the last ripple faded, her expression unreadable, her lips parted as though she might speak, but no words came. The wind pressed against her bare skin, cool and tender. She closed her eyes and let it touch her, imagining it was him, that it was love itself, free from the weight of consequence. For a fleeting moment, she felt both alive and unmade, a creature born of desire and ruin, wrapped in the warmth of the storm. She turned her face to the sky, her hair plastered to her shoulders, her breath shallow and trembling. If this is love, then let it devour me whole. The thunder answered, rolling through the night like laughter or mourning. She could not tell which. And as the rain fell harder, her body shimmered, dissolving into light and shadow, until she was no longer wholly there, part spirit, part memory, part sigh. The storm would pass, as all storms do, but the place where she had stood would remain changed, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine and salt, the ground glistening as though kissed by tears. Those who came after would feel it, though they would not know why. A tremor in the heart, a sudden shiver beneath the skin, the ghost of longing that neither time nor death could erase. And in that tremor, Lamia lived still,
her beauty undimmed, her hunger eternal, her love suspended between curse and divinity. For in the act of both union and destruction, she had become what the gods could never be, desire made flesh, sorrow made sacred.
Dawn crept over the horizon like a wounded animal, slow, shivering, unsure if it should rise. The storm had passed, leaving the world slick with its memory. The sea was calm now, its breath rhythmic and unhurried, as though nothing had happened beneath its watchful surface. But Lamia stood upon the shore, her body trembling with the weight of what she had done. The wind clung to her skin, carrying with it the scent of salt and the faint trace of his warmth already fading from her flesh. Her eyes, crimson and luminous, stared into the expanse where the man's body had vanished. The tide had claimed him, as the gods once claimed her children. The waves lapped at her feet, gentle, almost tender, yet she could feel the judgment hidden in their rhythm. The ocean had always been a mirror of her sorrow, reflecting her beauty and her damnation in equal measure. Now it seemed to whisper his name, pulling it from her lips again and again until it became a prayer. She fell to her knees, her hair cascading like ink around her, and pressed her hands to the wet sand. The world was quiet, except for the low hum of the sea and the fragile sound of her breathing. For the first time in centuries, Lamia did not feel hunger, only hollow ache. The ancient desire that had fueled her, sharp, consuming, divine, had burnt itself out in the act of love and ruin. What remained was softer, sadder, something dangerously close to peace. The gods watched, though unseen. They had expected rage or madness, another cycle of vengeance and despair, but Lamia did not curse them. She did not weep for mercy. She simply stayed there, her body bathed in the dim light of dawn, her expression unreadable. She had defied their cruelty by feeling deeply, and that defiance had left her both emptied and illuminated. The first rays of sunlight touched her skin, and for a moment she seemed human again. Her scales glimmered faintly, fading like mist. She traced her own reflection in the shallows, fingertips trembling. "Do you see?" she whispered to no one and to everyone. "I loved, and still I live." A seabird cried overhead, its wings slicing through the soft light. The sound startled her. It had been so long since she had noticed such small things. She lifted her gaze and watched it vanish into the pale sky, leaving behind a strange calm that settled into her bones. The air around her shimmered faintly, as though the world itself could not decide what she was anymore, monster or woman, curse or miracle. Her body began to change once more, but not as before. The transformation was slow, tender, like a flower unclosing after a long night.
the serpent in her unwound, its power dimming, its dominance yielding to something gentler. Her legs reformed, fragile and mortal. Her eyes softened, their red hue cooling to the color of dying embers. For the first time in centuries, she felt the true chill of morning upon bare skin. She drew her arms around herself, not in shame, but in recognition. This frailty was what she had feared and desired in equal measure, the state of being touched, wounded, alive. She remembered the feel of his hands, the way he had looked at her without flinching, and she realized that his gift had not been life nor forgiveness, but reflection. Through him she had seen herself not as the gods decreed her, but as she truly was, a being of infinite hunger, yes, but also of infinite capacity to feel. The waves pulled closer, as if to claim her once more. She stood, unsteady, her hair dripping with salt water. "No," she said softly, her voice breaking against the breeze. "Not yet." The sea hesitated, or perhaps she imagined it did. She stepped backwards, each motion deliberate, leaving faint footprints in the sand that the water tried and failed to erase. She would wander again, perhaps forever, but not as the Lamia of legend, the devourer of men, the monster sung about in fearful tones. She would walk as something else, a phantom of desire, a whisper of what love costs when it defies the heavens. Her journey carried her inland through quiet groves and empty fields. Flowers turned their heads as she passed, as though recognizing something ancient within her. The morning light followed her, soft and forgiving. Sometimes she thought she heard his voice in the wind, or saw his shape reflected in a pool of still water. Each time she paused, not to mourn, but to listen. It was in those silences that she began to understand. Love, like the ocean, does not vanish. It merely changes form. By the time the sun reached its height, Lamia's body had grown faint, translucent. She did not notice at first. The edges of her fingers blurred into light. Her shadow grew thinner. Yet she felt no fear. The boundaries of her curse had loosened, as though the gods themselves had forgotten to bind her. Or perhaps they had simply grown weary of punishing what they could no longer comprehend. She walked until she came upon a quiet spring nestled between stones. The water was clear, undisturbed, and when she gazed into it, she did not see the face of the monster. She saw a woman, tired, beautiful, still trembling with the remnants of love. A single tear fell, striking the surface, and the reflection shimmered, scattering into ripples of gold. When the wind passed again, her form scattered with it, dissolving like mist. Only her voice lingered, woven into the breath of the morning. "If I am forgotten, let it be for what I loved, not for what I destroyed."
The forest listened. The water stilled, and the air held her words as if reluctant to let them go. Some say her spirit took root there, that the spring became her resting place.
a pool that reflects the face of any who look upon it with longing in their hearts. Lovers who drink from it speak of dreams where a woman of impossible beauty appears by the water's edge, her eyes soft, her voice like the tide. She never asks for worship, only remembrance. By night, the same sea that had taken him still glows faintly where their final embrace took place. Sailors claim that under certain moons, a figure rises from the foam, a silhouette both luminous and sorrowful. Those who see her say she is neither seeking nor fleeing, but simply moving with the rhythm of the waves, carried by something larger than grief. In her wake, the air fills with a subtle fragrance, jasmine, salt, and rain. It lingers for a breath, then vanishes, leaving the heart heavy and inexplicably full. That is how one knows Lamia has passed nearby. Through the ache she leaves behind, the longing without object, the quiet reminder that desire, once awakened, never dies. So the story does not end with her redemption nor her damnation, but with transformation, an endless drifting between memory and myth. In the hush of dawn, when sea and sky blend into one endless silver veil, she moves unseen, her form woven from light and loss. And though she is gone from flesh, her presence endures in the tremor before a kiss, in the pulse that quickens without reason, in the moment one reaches for love, despite knowing it will break them. For that is her true immortality, not the curse, not the hunger, but the echo of her heart beating still, somewhere beneath the waves.
There are stories that never truly end, only fade, like the last sigh of the tide before dawn. Lamia's tale is one of them, a murmur that drifts between worlds, soft as breath, yet heavy with remembrance. She was born from beauty and condemned by it, shaped by divine cruelty and her own unrelenting heart. To speak her name is to taste the salt of tears and the sweetness of forbidden love. Her story endures not because it was just, but because it was human. They say beauty is a gift, but the gods who gave it to her made it a curse. Lamia's beauty was not the gentle kind, it devoured. It drew the gaze of mortals and immortals alike, and in their eyes she saw reflections of hunger, not affection. To be desired so deeply, yet never understood, is its own form of death. And so she learned that beauty, left untempered by compassion, becomes cruelty disguised in golden light. But there is something tender in her tragedy too. Beneath the scales and the sorrow, she loved as mortals do, with trembling hope, with desperate faith, with the naive belief that love could soften the heart of fate. even when her body was reshaped by pain, when the divine stripped her of everything, she clung to that fragile longing. In it, she remained alive. In it, she defied the gods. Desire, in the end, was her temple and her torment. It was what made her monstrous and what made her divine. Through her we glimpse the truth of all longing. It is not purity that sanctifies love, but the willingness to feel it, even knowing it will undo us. Lamia's hunger was not only for flesh or affection, but for connection, for the unbearable closeness of being seen and still loved despite the darkness. And perhaps that is why her spirit still lingers. She was never merely a cautionary tale, never only a seductress punished for passion. She is the shadow that moves through every heart that has loved too deeply, every soul that has touched beauty and been burned by it. She is the whisper in the lover's breath, the ache behind every stay, the voice that asks, "Would you still hold me if you knew what I am?"
The wind carries her still, though few recognize her touch. She passes through the sigh of waves, the shimmer of moonlight on wet skin. The moment one looks at another and forgets the world. She is not to be worshipped, but remembered, in silence, in stillness, in the fragile spaces between touch and departure. Sometimes in the blue hours of night, when the sea lies motionless and the stars seem to listen, the air thickens with her memory. It feels as though the world itself holds its breath, waiting for her to emerge again from the deep. Those who wander close enough might feel the faint brush of fingers against their cheek, a tenderness so fleeting it could be mistaken for the wind. Yet the heart always knows. The gods, it is said, have long ceased to speak of her. Perhaps they are ashamed. Perhaps they too were changed by her defiance. For in her love, Lamia revealed the hollowness of divine order, the cruelty of a heaven that cannot comprehend the pulse of mortal desire. What are gods, after all, if they cannot weep for what they destroy? Still, the world remembers her in fragments, in the curve of a wave, in the heat that lingers after a kiss, in the eyes of those who love without permission. Lamia's story, retold through centuries, has shifted its shape countless times. To some, she is the devourer, the serpent woman who punishes lust. To others, she is the forsaken mother, the victim of jealous gods. But to those who listen closely, to those who feel rather than judge, she is something else entirely, a mirror. For when we gaze into her myth, we see ourselves, our hunger, our shame, our yearning for tenderness even in ruin. We see the quiet truth that love does not cleanse, it consumes. And yet in that burning there is beauty. If you ever stand by the sea at twilight, when the horizon dissolves into mist, and the world feels neither alive nor dead, listen closely. The tide will hum her name, soft as the heartbeat of the earth. It will remind you that desire once awakened never truly fades. It only changes form, moving from body to memory, from voice to silence. And if for a fleeting instant you feel that someone unseen watches you with infinite sadness and infinite care,
Do not turn away. It is only Lamia, the dreamer exiled from her own beauty, lingering between love and oblivion. She will not harm you. She has long since grown weary of punishment and hunger. Now she seeks only remembrance, the simple grace of not being erased. When the sea calms, when the moonlight falls across the water like a touch, her reflection shimmers faintly. She does not smile, she does not weep, she simply is, like the memory of a lover you once knew and can no longer name.
But the ocean remembers. It keeps her voice within its depths, a melody too sorrowful for mortal ears. When waves crash against lonely cliffs, they echo the rhythm of her heartbeat, steady, eternal. Sailors whisper that she guards the drowned, guiding them through the dark with a touch that feels like forgiveness. In her, mercy survives the ruin of desire. Her name drifts in the language of dreams where boundaries dissolve. Sometimes in sleep, you might hear her hum, a sound both lullaby and lament. It winds through the chambers of the mind like smoke, carrying the weight of her eternal solitude. You awaken with the taste of salt on your lips, not knowing why. That is how she finds you, not in waking, but in the tender spaces between. She is the reminder that no beauty exists without sorrow, that no love escapes its shadow. The gods tried to make her a symbol of punishment, but she became something greater, the embodiment of the human heart's defiance. Through her, we learn that even the damned can love with grace, and even monsters can dream of gentleness. And so her myth endures, not as a warning, but as a whisper of courage. It tells us to love despite the ruin it brings, to reach for light even when we know it burns. It asks us to see ourselves not as perfect, but as whole in our imperfection. For to love, as Lamia did, is to surrender to the impossible, and in that surrender, to touch eternity. When the final tide withdraws and silence settles over the world, Lamia will remain. In the shimmer of dawn upon the sea, in the tremor that lives between longing and peace. Her story is not about vengeance or forgiveness, but the simple truth that love, once felt, leaves a trace that even time cannot erase. If you close your eyes now, you might hear her whisper rise again through the breath of the earth. I was never your monster. I was your mirror. And in that echo, soft, aching, endless, Lamia lives on.